Betsy, thanks for joining.
My pleasure.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. So you started Bomb Magazine in 1981,
Yes, I did.
and it's still going strong. You have a lot of amazing artist interviews, writers, artists. How did it start?
Well, it started with me at a kitchen table with a bunch of friends who were writers and artists and performers. I was acting at the time, but not seriously. I wanted to have a better understanding of dialogue. So I thought I'll take this on for a few years, easily because my then husband was a theater director and he wanted two paychecks. So every time he got a play to direct, he would cast me. But we were sitting around this kitchen table and we were really talking about process. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we started a magazine where we spoke about the work the way we speak about it among ourselves, which is entirely different from the way a critic would speak about it. And at the time, it was 1980, and everyone was working together. We were making films, we were making music, we were making theater. It was a really fertile time. And it was before anybody had become famous. So we were all free to kind of do what we wanted. And it was also a time when the rents were relatively inexpensive. So we weren't saddled with these incredible expenses that people are saddled with now. In any case, so when I said this, everyone said, wow, great idea. Let's do it. Now, I will say Sarah Charlesworth, who is one of my co-founders, a wonderful artist who has since passed away, had started The Fox with Joseph Kossuth. Glenn O'Brien had worked as a managing editor, and I put that in quotes because it was an interview. Did anyone work at interview, really? But somehow they managed to produce quite a bit. Um, Craig Golson came in later, but he had started the New York Rocker, and I had done a very crazy kind of broadsheet called X Magazine with Michael McClard, the artist, and Eric Mitchell, the actor. So we all thought we knew what we were doing, but we really didn't. And then Liza Bear quite generously came on board, and she was the co-founder with Willoughby Sharp of Avalanche magazine, and she actually taught us how to make a magazine. And then I was having dinner at Mary Heilman's place, and I was sitting next to a gentleman and I was telling him about this magazine. I said, now we're looking for a designer. And he said, well, I'm a filmmaker, but as it happens, I make my money through graphic design. So I'll do it. So it was kind of like these wonderful serendipitous moments where everybody said yes. And finally, we had a magazine.
So basically, it started from just a grassroots, having these conversations. You know all these artists, you're in the art world, there's a lot of cross-pollination.
Yeah.
You said it was a very fertile time to be an artist in New York with relatively cheap rents. You could come here and carve out a life as an artist.
Yes, you could. And it wasn't grueling, although it was New York in the late 70s and early 80s, and that was not fun. And it was really dangerous, but somehow most of us survived.
The magazine, Bomb Magazine, which is still very much alive today,
Yeah.
started from this place and time.
Yeah. Well, I did say because in this place and time, there were a lot of collaborations and they were short-lived. And I had seen Collab take over X magazine with all the best intentions, and it lasted two issues. So I said, somebody has to be in charge, someone has to be responsible, and that person is going to be me. I am going to be the editor in chief. And if anyone has a problem with that, you can walk. And no one had a problem with it because they had all seen what happens when there were too many, cooks in the kitchen, as it were. That said, it was New York in the early 80s. It was almost anarchistic. I would be walking down the street and somebody, an artist, would come up to me and say, we're doing an interview, so and so and me, in the next issue of Bomb. And I would go, really? I didn't know about it yet. So it was me saying, yes, I have to drive the car, but there were a lot of people in the back seat. And that was okay. It was fun. It was good.
So it was a little bit chaotic in those days.
It was very chaotic in those days.
How did it change through the years, and how did you guide it through the changing times?
Well, fundraising was always really, really hard. A friend of mine was working for Christophe de Manil, and we needed $3,000 to pay the printers. And she said, "Oh, I can write a check for Christoph up to $3,000. Let me just cover it. It's going to be a loan. You have to pay her back." And we took the loan and I paid her back. I don't know if all of you listening know who Christophe de Manil was, but her family were big Texas oil family parts for oil wells, had made gobs of money and were great art patrons. They have the De Manil Center in Houston, and they started Dia, and she really would have said, "Betsy, please don't bother." But I didn't ask. I just paid her back. And then I think Arto Lindsay and DNA and the Erasers and somebody else I forgot did a benefit concert for us, and we raised more money. And then miraculously, the New York State Council for the Arts, and we applied with one issue, the first issue, gave us a $5,000 grant. And at the time, that seemed a huge amount of money. And I thought, you know what? Because we didn't think it was going to last. We thought it would be two or three ephemeral issues. It would be magical. It would be wonderful. And then it would just go away because that was just the nature of the beast. But with that $5,000 grant, I thought, I think we can do this. I think we can make it. And then someone at the state council said, "But if you're a nonprofit, and at the time we were under the auspices of Avalanche, you can't take advertising." I said, "Well, in that case, you're going to have to give us a whole lot more money." And so they backed off. So how has it survived? With a lot of help and support from my friends, from visual artists who donated works of art, from really generous foundations and smaller family foundations, from selling ads, from selling subscriptions. I've always said, if you got a strong pack of twigs, if one floats away, you're still floating. But if
Mm.
you've just got one log and that sinks, you're gone. So that's been our strategy. And now, I mean, it's been almost 45 years. And how do we keep it fresh? We start from the ground. Our whole, I really believe in street smarts. So all of our contributing editors are practicing artists and writers. It's still an artists and writers magazine. Um, Half the staff are artists and writers, but now it's a staff of 14, and we're much wiser and we're much smarter about fundraising. And we're also, we've spent the last couple of years, how do I say this, trying to institutionalize, and I use that word loosely, by setting up a structure, an infrastructure that can support everyone, the people who work for BOM, their kids, they have to feed them, and really thinking long term. So
Mm.
all to say, we now have a development department.
It expanded quite a lot through the decades.
Yes, it's grown, but the one thing that has never changed is is our mandate, which is we deliver the artist voice. And we do that by working from the street on up. So with all of our contributing editors, our contributors come back to us and say, "Wow, that was a great process. Let's talk about doing it with so and so." So a lot is considered. Our editors are also very involved in making choices. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand. Because they read the magazine and they go, "Wow, it's so easy to read. It's so compelling." It doesn't get that way because we just throw the interviews up, the transcript, into the magazine or up online. We treat the transcript as a script in development. And the artists and the writers and the performers and the musicians and everyone involved gets their say. So we work on it in this way. We work on it collaboratively. One editor is assigned, and the narrator and the interviewer get their say, and we embed a lot of questions. How can you clarify this? What did you mean by this? Are you sure you want to say this? things that allow people to develop their ideas. So there's this, what I think is a wonderful transformation from the spoken word, which we try to maintain the integrity of the spoken word, and a literary text, because that's what we're creating, something to be read. And we all understand that. So some of the leaps are more obvious and others are very subtle, but we can go through 7 or 8 drafts until everyone has said what they want to say, the way they want to say it. And in my book, it's accessible. And
Hmm.
that means no jargon, no lousy rhetoric, no bullshit. I don't know how else to say it. Just, complex ideas can be explained simply. And that's what we try to do. We don't always. Sometimes they're just complex ideas and you got to dive in. But that's our goal.
I think that probably accounts for a lot of the success of the magazine.
It does. I think so too, because everyone thinks doing interviews are easy. And I've had artists come and say, oh no, I've heard about your interviews. Way too hard. I don't have time to do it now. But they always come back to us and do it later.
It sounds like it'd be very beneficial for the artist to do it, though. Like they could learn a lot from the
Yes.
process.
Well, as we also have a series that started in about 2012 called the Oral History Series, and it's in-depth oral histories with artists, visual artists from the African diaspora. And Cynthia Hawkins and Dinga McCannon both said when I asked them, I'm going to tell my story because if I don't, someone else is, and I'm not going to like what they say. So that's the impetus behind it. And also that at the time when we started it, there were so many Black artists who weren't being covered properly. And it's such a rich and important part of our culture, and it had to be included. It has to be included.
What are some of your favorite interviews historically from the magazine?
I can't say that. That's like asking who my favorite kid is. I absolutely can't say that. I can say some of the people who have passed away, who have meant a lot to me, whose interviews I think are brilliant. Paula Fox by Lynn Tillman, Cabrera Infante by Oscar Hijuelos. We've lost both of them. James Merrill. Oh my God, who did that one? And he passed away too, a wonderful poet. Why am I forgetting his name? It will come back to me. So yeah, we've done over the past 40 years, over 1,400 interviews just in print.
I really appreciate that contribution. It's beyond just artists that read it. It ripples out to the culture at large on that scale.
It does. I think so too. I'm going to just name 2 or 3 more. Trisha Brown by Yvonne Rainer, just because that pairing was so brilliant. Richard Prince interviewed, oh my God, Vito Acconci. And Vito approached it like the Catholic schoolboy he used to be with his little black pencil. And Richard came with 100 questions. So that was pretty remarkable. And what was the third? Oh, Laura Anderson and Marina Abramovic. And that was pretty incredible.
Amazing. On a personal level, what have you learned from running the magazine and from the interviews and just from the whole process?
Well, I think for me, the thing that keeps it fresh and keeps it fascinating is that notion that I brought up before, and that is of transformation. What I've learned is ideas aren't static and they're meant to grow, and they grow best in conversation. And they grow really well between 2 people who understand the creative process and what it takes to make something.
Mm.
So that's what keeps me going, I think, when I go, oh my God, this is so hard. Where the hell is the next payroll coming from? Um, but yeah, that's what keeps me going. And I think that's what I've learned is that you're constantly learning. And how much fun is that? Right?
Such a privilege.
Yeah, it is a privilege. It's also a pain in the ass, but yeah, I mean, I go back to the fundraising, but it's really, really, really hard. And I don't know how the younger generation does it now because it's a constant concern.
Speaking of the younger generation, I've heard that we're living in a post-literate culture. Have you sensed a shift?
Not in balm. I mean, I know, I know this because I think my novel, Station of the Birds, was called a literary novel. And my agent is a wonderful writer, Madison Smart Bell. I'm really, really lucky to have him because he's a brilliant writer. And I said, Madison, when did the word literary become a pejorative? I don't understand. He couldn't quite remember, but I know that happens. But no, not at Baum. I think people really respect language at Baum. For artists, visual artists, in some instances, it's their second language of choice, and so it's harder for them to um, just say what they mean in text. But we all struggle through it, and we all get there, and it's pretty good when we do.
There's still a lot of momentum and interest in Bomb as our attention spans are getting shorter.
Yeah, they are. And I would say that people probably don't spend enough time with all of our archives from 1981, all of our published content is online for free. I feel very strongly about that because it's this huge arc of our cultural history by the people who made it. So it's really, really important. And it's used by everyone from educators and students to scholars to the general public. But I would say that people who don't know what we do, and this is partly our fault and we have to correct it, don't know how to enter us or don't understand the commitment. And it does take some commitment, but the payoff is really, I hate to call it that, but that's in the end what it is pretty grand.
You mentioned your novel that came out this year, Station of the Birds, which I just finished reading, and it's amazing. I highly recommend people read it.
Thank you.
I was utterly transported. So it's a novel that you wrote some
In
years
the,
ago
in the 90s.
in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah. And I probably started it even before then. Okay, I'll go back and start it from the beginning. The Colonel for Station of the Birds, which takes place in Louisiana, in the Atchafalaya Basin of Louisiana for the most part, came when my friend Dickie Landry, who's a wonderful saxophonist and played up here with Phil Glass for many years, he and his wife, Tina Gerard, decided to move back to their hometown of Cecilia, Louisiana, to be closer to their families. At the time, I think both their parents were in their 90s, their surviving parents. And they went back and a tragedy happened. I mean, unspeakable. Dickie's son was working his way through college and it was a summer and he was working at a gas station and some kids came in and murdered him, assassinated him. And it was inexplicable. I mean, you talk about these stupid, random acts of violence, but it wasn't that random. I had gone to school down south. So I had gone to school in New Orleans, to be specific, Newcomb, which was a girls' part of Tulane. So I was very familiar with the deep and abiding culture that has made up the complexity of Southern life, from the violence, the racism, to the great joy and vibrancy of the cultures when they mix, and they do. Um, so I went down there really to see Dickie and Tina, to see how they were doing, but also in the back of my mind to see if there was a story there. Because I had been mesmerized as a northerner who grew up in southern Connecticut, I was mesmerized by the South. Um, and so I got down there and Dickie and Tina were so generous with their stories. And then I started hearing, well, they told me the gossip around this death. The kid was drug dealing. So it was a fight between drug dealers. It was an argument between drug dealers. Now, this was at the time when it happened, the early 80s, and a lot of middle class and lower middle class kids were in fact working their way through college by selling soft drugs. It was just a fact. So was he dealing? Maybe he was. But then it got worse. Um, Dickie crossed the color line. He played with both black and white musicians, and he played I mean, he played with everyone who was great. He played with Clifton Chenier, who's possibly the greatest Zydeco musician ever. And he played with Phil Glass. He was really Catholic in his choices. But the Southern white racists down there said, well, because he played with Black people, he set a bad example. And that's why the kid died, because he was consorting with the wrong people. And then there were other things like, musicians. I mean, everyone's a musician in Southern Louisiana. Not everyone makes their money off of being a musician in Southern Louisiana. So a couple of musicians were working in the offshore oil rigs, and they would come back with stories about, wow, I don't know if I can do this. It is so dangerous. There are so many drugs coming in through the rigs. Yeah. And we don't know how long we can handle this. These are like really dangerous people. So all of that was mucking around in my head. And then there were the other stories they were telling me about the traiteurs and the shaman and the fortune tellers and the and the priests who would go out into the fields because it was a lot of sugar cane and rice plantations down there. And bless the fields before the crops were about to grow and bloom and whatever. So there was all this, not really gossip, concern and stories and some gossip. And then there was the South, which, as you know, is very layered. So I knew, in other words, that there was a lot of really juicy material there, if only I could take a deep dive. So I did.
Such a richly textured, and you can sense that you've really dived deep into the culture and you were immersed in this culture, and it really comes out in the book.
Okay, thank you. I was lucky I went to school there, and I was lucky to have such superb guides. And I spent a lot of time, like 10 days, literally in the swamp with a guide, Garland Frederick. And we would go around in his little skiff and just go everywhere. And he finally said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "Garland, how the heck do I know?" You know? But there was this beautiful great blue heron who lived in the little cove harbor where we launched from. And I would go, Garland, let's just follow that blue heron and see where he goes. And that blue heron actually took us to Cane Island, which is a sort of central place.
Oh, that was a real place.
Yeah, in the middle of the swamp, in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we almost didn't make it in because it was a really shallow creek that got us there, but we did.
And were there structures there? Had people been living there?
Um, Yes, they hadn't been living there. They were hunting camps, like, on stilts, a little rambling, porch, and then one room with a lot of like berths and a hole in the roof for the fire.
And I'm really transported not only on a physical way, but on a spiritual level. There's a lot of imagery of the birds and what they mean and them being kind of emissaries to the gods.
Hmm.
So there's just so many levels to the book. And then you have also that it's set because it was written in the 90s about of the 80s, right? It would have been set in the 80s. Is that
It
correct?
was set in the 80s, written for the most part. Oh, and then I came back and I thought I was so enchanted with the swamp. And I thought this would be an incredible setting for a film. So I wrote a screenplay
Ah, yes.
called Cane River, which became Station of the Birds. And I took it out to Hollywood because some of my friends were already screenwriters. And everyone in Hollywood said, wow, this is so good. But I have to tell you something. It's a novel. It's so vivid. Have you ever thought about making it into a novel? And I thought, oh, silly Hollywood. And I went back home. I had just started Bomb, or I was just about to start Bomb, and I threw it in a drawer somewhere. And then quite a few years later, my grandfather asked me to write the story of his life. And he said, and I know it's going to be a novel. I know you're going to have to make it up because you weren't there. And that's okay with me. I'm fine with that. And I thought, how the hell am I going to write a novel? And then it all came back to me. So I thought, well, I use a screenplay as an outline. And I'll teach myself how to write a novel by writing this first. and then I'll tackle this bigger project. So that's what I did.
Do you still write? And were you writing all those years between?
No, I wasn't. I really was acting and I was writing screenplays like for independent film, like really, really experimental film. Um, I mean, I was 29 when I started Balm. So it's not like I had been working for a really long time. But yes, but I'd always thought I would write screenplays or make experimental films. And then I started Balm and that kind of took over. And I even stopped acting because it was just so consuming. And then I thought, well, the one thing I can do because I can make it in my own time is write. So I started writing. But since then, I've almost always been writing. I mean, I was really sick twice over, so I had to take a few years off and just do Balm, but I'm absolutely fine now. But so Station of the Birds, I sent it out through a wonderful agent named Emma McSweeney. And I thought, wow, I've got it made. She was at Harold Ober, and Harold Ober was Faulkner's agent, Hemingway's agent. I mean, everybody's agent. I thought, this is it. And every publisher in New York turned it down for being too dark, too dense, too difficult.
I found it quite accessible and
Too.
yeah.
Thank you. It's a thriller, right? Or maybe
Yeah.
it's a mystery masquerading as a thriller, but it's a page turner. What was wrong with them?
Maybe in those days people wanted a happier ending or they wanted things to be more resolved. But to me, the book reflects more media you see now, which is more a reflection of how life actually is
Yes, yes, this is true.
and more nuanced.
But anyway, so again, I put it in a drawer. This time it's a novel.
After trying to publish a novel in New
Yeah.
York. Yeah.
And I started on the story of my grandfather's life, which I'm almost done with. It's taken me a long time, but it's of course my family, and so it's difficult to put it mildly. And then when I was finishing this, I called Madison and I said, I've got this first novel, and I have never, ever doubted it. I know it's really good. Would you read it and just take it on as a small project, like just send it to a few independent publishers because nobody else is going to take it. I know that. And he read it. I mean, he grew up in Tennessee. And he's written about the South extensively. And he called me and he said, yeah, I'm going to send this out. I can't believe how good this is. So he was really my cheerleader. But in all fairness to the small independent presses, the one that said yes was Spite and Dival, which is a really small, courageous one man TT. Who runs the whole thing. They were the ones who said yes. It wasn't Knopf, or anybody else at Random House or, FSG. Once again, it was, the small indie publishers who stepped up
I'm glad it's published. I'm glad that people
to.
have a chance to get it and read it, and they absolutely should because it's thoroughly enjoyable. And also, it's not just entertainment. There are layers to it. I feel like you're absorbing the culture of the South on a deeper level. There's poetry in there, there's nuance. I think it's just a brilliant book.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to tell you, you brought up the birds. When I came back here, I mean, one of my favorite things to do is research because it's such a luxury. You can go anywhere, anytime, and stay there. And so my mantra through all of this was Peter Cole, wonderful poet, from Things on Which I've Stumbled. And I bring this up in every interview, but I have to because it's so good. And this is the first poem. It's improvisation on lines by Isaac the Blind. And Isaac the Blind was a rabbi, maybe 12th century Provence, who was also a Kabbalah, a scholar of the Kabbalah. And this is just the first stanza. Only by sucking, not by knowing, can the subtle essence be conveyed. Sap of the word and the world's flowing. And that's what I always come back to when they say, oh God, how is this going to work? Only by sucking, not by knowing, right? So what I did is I came back up here and I just allowed myself the luxury of wherever I wanted to go in terms of the research. And the one thing that struck me, because it was true of my father and my grandfather, and it was true of many of the relationships I was seeing down south, um, was James Hillman, who was a Jungian psychologist, really brilliant, wrote a lot of books. One of them, where he said, what's interesting about the Oedipus complex is not that Oedipus slept with his mother, because he didn't know he was sleeping with his mother. The really interesting thing about this is that his father, upon hearing from a seer that his son would ultimately kill him, had the infant brought up to Mount Etna or wherever it was and abandoned with his, and left to die. So it was infanticide. And that's the interesting thing about the Oedipus complex, is that the father wants to kill the son because he's afraid he'll usurp his power. And I went, oh, wow. Okay, that's one really important aspect. Another, the swamp was filled with the most beautiful birds. And I fell in love with each and every one of them. I mean, they were just so dear. And I came back here and I was reading, on blue herons, et cetera, et cetera. And I happened on Aristophanes' The Birds. I don't know how, it just literally almost fell in my lap. And I thought, oh, wow, this is like a play. And it's a satire. And the birds build a city where they are meant to tax men's smoke and, everything they're sending to the gods to ask them for help. Their sacrifices, as it were. And the birds think they're going to win this war, and they think they're going to be able to toll man. And if they don't pay the price, they're going to defecate in their water supplies. They're going to peck out the eyes of their livestock. They're going to do, basically all the things that bad human tribes do to get their way. And men trick the birds. And they go back to being mere messengers between man and the gods. And I thought, well, this is perfect. This is the chorus. I've got all the birds. And so that's how they became the chorus. And it was very useful. I mean, it worked, but I didn't know it was going to work. I was just too busy sucking it all up.
So basically, Station of the Birds is a Greek tragedy.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And if you were to go down south, they would tell you every piece ever written in the South, from Faulkner to Eudora Welty, is a Greek tragedy. So I fell right in line.
Have you seen the show The White Lotus?
No, I haven't. Should I? Is it still running?
There's 3 seasons. They're still making it. It's just beautifully made. It's beautifully shot. It's quite intense, but it's very much the most contemporary Greek tragedy that I can imagine. It's like hyper real in many ways.
Will you email me the information?
Of course. Absolutely, I will. All that time as the editor-in-chief at Bomb and as a writer as well, that seems like a very fortunate thing that you had such skill in writing as the editor-in-chief. Did you feel like that was a way to sort of creatively utilize your skills as a writer?
It was a very creative way to utilize my writing skills, because while I don't think editing and writing are the same thing, I think great writing really helps you become a great editor. And that's not to say I rewrite anyone, because I don't, but I do make suggestions.
And you have to know how to see it, right?
And you have to know how to see it, and you have to know how to listen to it. And you have to know how to imagine it as a narrative, because you want to carry the reader along. So they have fed each other. But I will say, now that I'm writing more, I'm editing less, because I don't need that creative outlet. And I have an extraordinary group working with me to create these interviews, from gosh, Alan Gilbert, who's a wonderful poet, is the web editor. And Ben Samuel is our literary editor. Tyler Considine, Juan, June, B. I mean, there's an extraordinary group that, and the writers involved, especially if they're curators or literary writers, are very, very good. It's not like we ask, how do I say this? We don't ask journalists to do the interviews. We ask peers to do the interviews. So they're already pretty accomplished and secure in themselves. So it's it's a different process. And it's not that it's easier, but it's very fruitful.
Well, also they know the work, they know the person, they are have unique perspectives.
Yeah. In some cases, they've been visiting the artist studio for 12, 15, 20 years. Well, it's a way of seeing the work that's intimate, yet rigorous. And I think that that authenticity comes across and it's very enticing to people because they feel like they're just, a fly on the wall, but they're not. They're actually participating in the conversation because they're going to take these ideas and walk on out into the world with them and spread them around and discuss them further. So I see it as an ongoing process.
That's it. And it's so important what you're doing and what you've done. It's one of those things that you can't really quantify. Being an artist in a community and feeling like you're connected to community is such a privilege. I mean, we're so fortunate to have that in New York.
Well, I think, and I hope this is true, that it's really spread now, and it's not only in New York City. So that, it's certainly in LA, in Chicago, in Brussels, in Berlin, in Paris. And, I mean, I think now there are multiple centers, and I think that's important because I would also like to see a really strong groundswell where people stay put, stay in Detroit and make it into a unique art center. And that's beginning to happen too so that people don't have to leave to become what they want to become. I think that'll make us a stronger nation and a stronger world. But let's see. The art center is the art center because it's a marketplace, really.
The cultural and material capital of the world, right?
Yeah. And that's not making the culture. That's just making it possible for people to eat and pay the rent or buy a house.
How do you see the importance of art on the culture as a whole?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I've always seen it as being the vision that leads us into the future. One of them, anyway. And how could we live without it? It's where we're free spirits. It's where we can imagine what if. And if you can imagine a better world, you can make a better world. But I do think you have to imagine it first. And you have to be involved in making it. So that's my short, simple answer.
That's really good. I appreciate that. For your own work, what do you like to read? What do you like to look at? What are sources of inspiration for you?
Well, this is a hard one because I am just getting to George Sanders' Lincoln on Bardo. I mean, I am so behind. I have books where piled up and I go to the bottom just to see what's still there, and it's from 2002. So I'm not going to answer that question. It's embarrassing, but I have so much reading to do for Bomb, so much research to do, and then I have my own writing. So I don't read nearly as much anymore as I would like to. There's not enough hours in the day because I need to read my history. I tend to go back to the Jews.
Your family was from Eastern Europe?
My family was from Ukraine and Lithuania, and my grandmother says Vienna. She doesn't say Austria, and Budapest. So mixed.
When did they come to the United States?
They came in the 1890s. They came a while ago. And then there were trickles coming. I have two cousins who were still in Russia during the revolution. One of them was married to a white Russian officer, and the other one was married to a Bolshevik general. And the Bolshevik general and his wife got the white Russian widow by then out of Russia. And then when it was time, when Stalin took power, and it was obvious that I mean, it wasn't obvious, but he was killing everyone. Luckily, my cousin and her husband and their little girl were at the Australian mission when Stalin called them back to murder them. And they said, I don't think so. And escaped to Canada. And then from Canada, my family got them into the States.
You grew up in Connecticut, you said?
I grew up in Connecticut, but I grew up in Connecticut with a lot of, as I said, that trickle of European and Russian. And so with a great sense of historical imperative, a lot of escapes.
So you went to school, undergrad in New Orleans,
Yes, I did. Newcomb.
and Newcomb, and you moved to New York right after that?
I went to New York for a nanosecond, and then my then boyfriend, who was at Tulane, got miraculously, I might add, because he was a political activist, and I don't know when he studied, but he got into law school in San Francisco. So I followed him to San Francisco. He got into the University of the Jesuits, and I looked up art schools in the Yellow Pages because by then I was kind of like set on going to art school, and the San Francisco Art Institute popped up. So I went from Newcomb, where I was studying Tennessee Williams, um, to the San Francisco Art Institute with some of the greatest artists and filmmakers you can imagine. The Kuchar brothers were my teachers. I don't know if you know them, but they influenced Warhol. Jay DeFeo, who nobody knew outside of San Francisco then, but has since become a famous artist. They did a retrospective of her work at the Whitney,
I
maybe.
saw that. If you make one painting like the rose,
The Rose. She was in the conference room at the San Francisco Art Institute. Anyway, there's a long list. I'm not going to go through it, but I was really lucky to have landed there. And it changed my world around because I went from this very, how do I say this? New Orleans is possibly the most decadent city in the United States, but it's also a Catholic city. And so there's that balance that one has to strike. And it's a not rigid city, but it's got some pretty tight rules. So I went from that to San Francisco Art Institute, where there were no rules and everything could be done. And it was pretty wild and pretty wonderful. And a lot of Peter Focuses, not a lot, but two of his students were in the sculpture department, and they were like Hell's Angels. I mean, it was such a vast arc of characters, and it was all fascinating. Oh, and Mary Lovelace O'Neill, my adored Mary, who was teaching at the Art Institute and just passed away, one of our great painters. Anyway, it was a great education. I did graduate from there.
from SFAI.
Yes, San Francisco Art Institute.
And did you study visual art there?
I had gone from studying, yes, theater and visual art to just visual art, but it took a lot of film classes. Great James Loudon, I think that was his name. He was a great film historian. He was teaching at the Arts Institute at the time. And I don't know how he did it, but he said, I'm going to teach you how to know the work of a director in 3 frames. And he did. He did. So, and then I got here and there's a film anthology.
So when you graduated from there, did you come straight here?
Yeah, and then I took me a year to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I came straight here. I knew I wanted to come straight here. I don't know what took so long, but I did. And luckily, I had friends who had graduated from the Art Institute who were already here, who helped me. And the last job I had in San Francisco was with Tom Marioni, wonderful conceptual artist who had the Museum of Conceptual Art. And he had just fallen in love with Catherine Brown, who ran this wonderful Crown Point Press. And so Dennis Oppenheim and his then girlfriend, Krista Mywald, wonderful, wonderful artist, were coming to the museum for an installation. And Tom said, sorry, I've got to go off with Catherine for the weekend, but you can handle it. You're in charge. I was just a student. I didn't even know where the hardware store was, right? And poor Dennis and Crystal Land, and they had it was, I don't know if you remember this piece. It was a puppet that kept hitting the bell. Metal puppet hitting a metal bell. It's enough to drive anybody crazy. That's what they were installing. I had no idea what I was doing. Dennis and Krista took over, but they took pity on me. They ended up liking me. I don't know why, because I wasn't that helpful. And they said, you have to move to New York. You have to get the hell out of here. So they found me a loft, a portion of a loft. They found me a job with Alana Heiss, who was the founder of the PS1, but at the time was running the clock tower. They introduced me to everyone. I mean, I had a charmed entry into New York City. They picked me up at the subway station with my suitcase, my cat, and the $300 in my purse, which is all I had.
So that laid the groundwork for Bomb Magazine, knowing
Yes,
having
it
those
did.
connections.
It really did because of the lot of the artists who, well, Sarah Charlesworth, Gordon Mata was my first boyfriend. I mean, right? So a lot of that, make it yourself. You can do it. But also a lot of the support. I think that's another way I knew Christophe Duminil because Gordon was selling his father's watercolors to subsidize his own work. So there were a lot of, that's how I met Dickie Landry. And everyone was really kind. And that's how I met Liza Bear and really helpful and really supportive.
I know a guy, Tony Muscatello. I don't know if you know him. He
I
was on the
know
podcast. He was working at Food, Gordon's restaurant back in the 70s or 80s.
he was. He was
Hmm.
working at food.
He worked at Food. Yeah. Do you know Jane Crawford?
Yes, I do. I love Jane. Well,
She's great.
Gordon broke up with me because he fell in love with Jane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I met Lindsay Smith, who became my husband, who was the theater director, who taught me everything I know about dialogue. So it was sad breaking up, but it was the right way to go. But Jane's fabulous. And then she got married to Bob Fiore after.
I knew Bob as well. Yeah, one of my favorite documentaries of all time, Pumping Iron. They did
Yes.
this in entire.
Yeah, it was sad. We lost both of them, but life is full of joy and pain, and that's just the way it goes. So there we all were. But it was a very tight-knit group of friends who welcomed the younger artists in ways that I don't know if that's still happening. So we were very lucky in that respect.
Tony Muscatello, who I mentioned earlier, who worked at Food, was saying that there was basically one art world in those days.
Yes. Well, there wasn't because there was, of course, plenty going on in Europe, but a lot of Joseph Cassuth was going to Europe all the time. So was Sarah, so was Gordon, because his father was in Paris. Um, so yes, but it was a much smaller art world. It was manageable. You knew everyone. You could have these intimate conversations, which is really what Baum grew out of. And you could work in other mediums because like I was. Bump started in 81, but until 1983, I was still acting and I was acting in Gary, Indiana's plays. And it was The Phantoms of Louisiana. And Ross Bleckner did the sets. So every time we needed to change the set, I would grab one of his paintings and pull it along on a pulley and just move it across the stage. I mean, it was that kind of freedom and that kind of, you could dip your toes anywhere and you could learn from it. And that was kind of fantastic.
That's so cool. And I think that it does seem to me now looking at that time, or with the sort of, I guess, benefit of hindsight in a way, it seems like that it was a kind of a renaissance.
It did feel that way. I mean, in retrospect, I have no idea I mean, I do have every idea what it felt like then. What it felt like then was you just work, 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 and then you played, 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 played. I couldn't play that hard and work that hard, so I played less and worked more. But a lot of people did both. I don't know how they did it.
It seems like something you could tap into,
Yeah,
the energy of that.
yeah, yeah, it was pretty strong.
There's so much cross-disciplinary work. You've got musicians and theater people working with artists and visual artists and then writers. It doesn't seem like happens as much these days.
I don't know. I don't know. I
That
mean,
kind of collaboration.
yeah, it's not like I don't have younger friends. I do, and I have a lot of godchildren, so I hear stuff from them, but it doesn't feel like it happens as much. But I don't know.
What do you think are some of the challenges that younger artists face today?
Oh God, they're going to have to tell you. I can't answer that question. I mean, I know just putting food on the table and finding a roof over your head is challenging.
The rent.
Now, Char
Mm.
Jouret did the cover for Stations. Is it upside down? No. And she's a remarkable artist. And my guess is she might still have to work as a waitress, but she's had, shows at Artist Space. She's shown in Paris. She's shown at in museums. I mean, I don't know what artists have to go through now to survive.
I worked for an artist who was showing in basically a blue chip gallery and had to start working in retail.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good artists who have been working for 40 more years, and now they don't have galleries because their galleries have closed, or the work's not selling because nothing's selling. I mean,
Have you seen other periods of time in which it was at this level? And
it was
what
at this
periods?
level probably in the 70s. There was a big crash in 81. We've been through a lot of, this is I don't know enough about economics, but let me put myself out on a limb here and say, are we in end stage capitalism? Are we seeing booms and busts? So, and how often do they happen? And when was our last bust? There's been a lot of busts.
Oh yeah, you mean the housing crisis, COVID?
Yeah, COVID was just the most recent, right? Or was it?
Yeah,
There
yeah.
one
I
since
want to
then?
say,
Can't
yeah, I think
remember.
so. And then maybe right now,
Yeah, and maybe right now, I don't know, although now it feels just weird.
I
Um,
know.
but anyway, but let's not end on that note.
No, let's not. Let's end on we have to end on something hopeful.
Yeah,
What gives you hope for the future?
what I do, the fact that I get up every morning and I get to converse and work with brilliant people with strong values who care about humanity and care about the future, and are not cruel. Think kindness. Kindness is on the top of the list of things you have to be. Um, yeah, that's what gives me hope.
Well, I thank you for that. And I thank you for all of your work and your contributions.
Thank you.
Truly, you're doing amazing work. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for such great questions and for your great work.
Oh,
Okay,
thank you, Betsy. It was a
stay in
pleasure.
touch.